isn't just something that could exist within the idea of a debate around global policy. It is harrowing, violent and aggressive anti-Semitism, and we expect that from the right. Do you know, I expect to be called a jihadist by people who ascribe to Tommy Robinson's politics. I expect idiots to play out that sort of fascism from the right. When it comes from the left, it seems to come with a sense of righteousness and almost smug nature that we can't be wrong because we're the goodies. We have to break down in society the idea that some people are heroes and others belong in the bin, because the world just simply does not work like that. Nobody is perfect. And we have created of late, and I obviously blame the internet. I saw Tim Berners-Lee, the creator of the internet, saying it wasn't working for women and girls this week, to which my husband said, I wonder if they've tried to switch it on and off. And I was like, I don't think that means that they can't get on it, Tom. Bless him. It's certainly the divisive nature of the way that our politics and our discourse works at the moment seems to put people in goody camps and baddie camps and leaves no room for complex global situations that people, you know, it is amazing how many people on Twitter think that they could solve the Israel-Palestine crisis. And one wonders why they haven't turned their hand to it rather than just spouting off online. They seem to have a huge amount of skill that is going untapped on the global stage. So we have got to, as a Labour movement, do a huge amount to recognise, to celebrate, to bring on board back again our Jewish brothers and sisters, because at the moment, the most honest appraisal I have heard of it, actually, and when I first read the headline, I thought, gosh, you shouldn't say that, because I thought she was asking Jewish people not to vote for her in an aggressive manner, but was a Scottish woman, a parliamentary candidate in the last general election, who just said, I cannot yet ask Jewish people to vote for me. I cannot yet ask that people could take that step. And because I'm so used to seeing anti-Semitism within the Labour Party, I had assumed she was saying something anti-Semitic when I first read the headline. But she was of the leader who, it seems, under whom all of this problem has occurred, who seems to have given a green light to some of that discourse. It isn't enough that when you harm people so badly, when you turn against people so badly, that you don't have to do much, much, much more to rebuild those bridges. I won't feel, and we are a long way off this, I won't feel that our movement has gone far enough until Luciana Berger herself feels that she could return to the Labour Party. For me, that is the ultimate test, not only because she is a dear friend of mine, but because of all who departed, she feels the most fervent about how much the Labour Party has to do. We have got to make sure that our Jewish Labour movement feels not just tokenistically consulted on something. I know what that feels like, to be in that room where if somebody feels that they've got to tick the box by talking to you. I am that person for the government very often. They're like, oh gosh, is this any good for women? Oh yes, we saw Jess, so it's probably fine. And then they go and do something that completely damns women. It isn't a box-checking exercise. The exercise has got to be fully with the agency of Jewish organisations self-organising within our movement, making demands that can be met and are met without question. I don't understand personally how when somebody posts a picture of the Statue of Liberty with a monster on its face with the Star of David sucking across the face, I don't know how that can be up for debate. I don't understand a system of scrutiny that looks at paper evidence. I'm somebody who spent a huge amount of time in the criminal courts being very, very badly let down. And there is paper evidence. Usually it is a slam dunk. The reality of blatant evidence still being open for months and months and months of the end. It does not bear explanation, that sort of image. It only says one thing. It does not bear explanation to suggest that Jewish people are more loyal to Israel than they are to whichever country they reside in. I am originally, well, I'm not originally, actually, I'm originally from literally a minute from this building, but my family has very specific political views on the Troubles in Ireland. My father is from Derry originally. I was no one has ever suggested that my loyalties lie in Northern Ireland, ever, once, in my entire political career. Millions of people have suggested that my loyalties lie in Israel. I'm not even Jewish, and apparently my loyalties lie in Israel. I had some absolutely cracking nights out in Tel Aviv when I was about 19. You could say that about many countries in the world, that my loyalties also don't lie in. No one ever says it, in fact, to constituents. They never is it called into question that their commitment to Kashmir overrides their desire to get their children educated or for the bins to be collected outside their houses. It seems to be exclusively for the Jewish community, wherever they reside, to be controlled by somebody elsewhere. The amount of shekels that I'm meant to have been given, I only wish I knew where this bank account was, because in this times of downturn, I think we're all going to have to tap into that Israeli money we've been piling up somewhere. The truth is that we have a huge way to go, and not only just in the labour movement. I look around at a city like Birmingham, where the Jewish community, when I was a child, even this building, it was bigger, and every Friday, every Saturday, you would see Jewish families walking down the road. I grew up literally minutes from here, and you would watch Jewish families walking down Russell Road from King's Heath and Moseley, where I live, to get here to the synagogue. And when I was at school, there was a huge Jewish community at my school, and I see now, I mean, I was always really jealous of the kids who went to King David School because they got to finish early on a Friday. I was constantly like, Mum, can we be Friday? And now I look around at the city, and the Jewish community is far smaller, far fewer than it was when I was a kid. And I, at the same time, have to look at the rise of hatred that we see across, not just in the UK, not just in the labour movement, but across the world towards Jewish people, the rise in anti-Semitism, that it is deeply important to me and for my children and for the children in my city that they are taught not just about the horrors of what occurred in Jewish history, but also about the sense of community. And I suppose the saddest thing about the fracture between the Jewish community and the labour movement, for me, for my father, the big trot that he is the sense that in the Jewish faith there is an innate socialism that marries so largely with that of the labour movement that it is no surprise that they were such bedfellows for so long, that we have to celebrate the Jewish community far more and educate people far more, especially in a city like Birmingham, where the fractures in Israel, Palestine, in diaspora communities play out as if they are a reality here in our city. We have got to make sure that we are educating and acting together with communion across our communities. And in Birmingham, there are amazing examples of that. There are amazing examples of Jewish groups and Muslim groups, especially, I have to say this, I'm sorry to the men in the room, but especially Jewish and Muslim women's groups in our city who do a huge amount to try and bridge a genuine divide that in a place like Birmingham could really act to harm and sow seeds of miseducation between a very, very Islamic community and a depleting Jewish community. And so those efforts that are made in the area are doing huge amounts to build a divide, across a divide, and show that we are all one community. And we are about to, my mum always said, never waste a crisis. And so I haven't said that on Twitter yet because I feel like, the people whose families are probably going to die or have already died might not appreciate that there may well be a silver lining in this moment of horror that we are currently facing, and that is that a virus doesn't care which side you fall on with regard to how you vote. It doesn't care which side you think is the goodie and the baddie in Israel and Palestine. It doesn't care about any of those things. And it needs us all to work together to look after each other. And so I hope in this time of crisis, there will be so much more of that working together as a community. And I am here to do whatever I can for your community and for the Board of Deputies, and do whatever we can to try and rebuild some of those bridges with the Jewish community. How are you like that? Oh, thanks. I haven't got corona. Oh, yeah. I haven't got it.
Thank you so much. Jess, could I ask you, I know some deputies would like to ask some questions. We've only got one microphone with us today. Would you be able to sit down so that the deputies can ask? And can I say, I really appreciate, please sit down, all of the fantastic effort and your speech, because you're right, never waste a crisis. That really, really does resound, and we do need to work together. And I agree, being a woman, class, accent, I really associate with that myself, of the difficulties that people can face, and I think you've been very, very brave. Thank you. So deputies, please come to the microphone, as usual. And because we've only got one microphone and we have our rules for standing apart, could you please keep your distance, and there's some hand sanitizer afterwards. You don't have to all stand. You could sit around this area, deputies, if you would like to. So the question will need to be asked, and then you will need to go back to your seat, and then Jess will come back to the microphone. Thank you. We'll get there. Thank you.
Richard Cohen of Loughton Federation. Thank you very much. This question is about Trevor Phillips. I'm very concerned. Well, Trevor's, I think, given tremendous support over decades to facilitate communal harmony between the religions and between the races. And I feel now that, having read of his suspension from the Labour Party, that it's not so much because of the comments that he's alleged to have made that have been trawled up against him, which I think are at worst fairly mild criticisms, and they're certainly not Islamophobic. And I'm just wondering whether there's some scapegoating going on here. Thank you.
Trevor Phillips and I, because we have the same surname, often when we are together, like to embarrass people who feel a bit anxious about talking about race and pretend that we're brother and sister. Because it makes people not want to say the obvious thing in the room. Are you really? Yes, we are. So we're not actually brother and sister, obviously. Look, you know, I think that it's amazing how the defence of being a lifelong anti-racist only works for some people. I think that I have to listen to some of my Muslim colleagues on the criticism about the things that he has said. And if I'm being completely honest, I haven't actually read any of the stuff that he was meant to have said. But I have seen some criticism from some in the Muslim community and the alternative as well. Some Muslim people saying, well, actually, no, that I don't consider this to be Islamophobic. But I do think that we have to listen to those people's voices if, now that this has happened, to look at some of the things that he has said. And he would be the first person, I imagine, who would agree with me that he's willing to robustly defend some of the things that he may have said and explain them. But if there are people in the Muslim community saying that they feel that what he has said is Islamophobic, then I have to listen to that because it's not for me to say. However, the timing does seem... the trouble is with the Labour Party at the moment is there is no good faith. I cannot say they are acting in good faith in taking these actions because I don't believe that there isn't one rule for one and one rule for the other. Now, I always think that's probably been the case, to be perfectly honest. People protect their own in almost every institution. However, at the moment, I know personally I have felt that if I were to say some of the things that have been said by some of my colleagues, I would have been kicked out of the Labour Party because of who I am, not because of what I say. And I think that Trevor Phillips is at risk of falling foul of both having said some things that people, now that they've been dredged up, consider to be offensive, but that, yes, he was also scapegoated. I think those two things can exist at once, and I think that they are both true. But, you know, he's been an amazing ally in race relations, and you cannot undo that massive work. But we need to get to a point with all communities, and this idea that you're either a hero or in the bin, I say it because as somebody who grew up in a very, very diverse community, I don't think any community is beyond criticism of the things that might become the norm, cultural norms. I don't think that any community is beyond criticism, and we have to be really, really careful that we are not stifling debate on criticisms about the way that people do things just because that's the way they've always been done, by immediately assuming bad intent through racism. And so we're not in a place in discourse at the moment where we can intelligently manage that, and that's a real problem.
Who's next? And then I know that Ruth would also like to ask a question, perhaps after you, Chaim. Thank you.
Chaim, Jess, I heard you speak at Limud and I've heard you speak here and very impressed. And I have to say, all power to your elbow, which is the elbow we greet each other with now, within the Labour Party and perhaps, who knows, in government with a reformed Labour Party. I just wanted to ask if, regarding the candidates now, who you would most see yourself serving under of the three. That's not a tough question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would most see myself, well, I could see myself serving under either Keir Starmer or Lisa Nandy, to be perfectly honest. I can't see how I would serve under Rebecca Long-Bailey. Not because I don't like her personally. I lived in her house for 3 weeks when I was first elected because I had nowhere to live, and her and Angela Rayner had a spare mattress on the floor in their living room, so I slept there for the first 3 weeks that I was elected, so I don't have any problem with her personally. But I don't agree with some of the lots of the things that she said, and I fear it will just be a continuation of the problems that we have had. But I could serve under either Lisa or Keir quite happily. However, the test of both their mettle, not just in relation to the problems of anti-Semitism and sexual harassment and other disciplinary problems within the Labour Party, but actually their test of their mettle as leaders will very, very quickly be to show that they are in charge. So there is a huge amount of talk of unity at the moment, the need for unity, which I get, you know, it's a nice thing to say, but actually what we need is leadership. What we need is somebody who will show that they are in charge and what they will and won't tolerate, because trying to please all the people all the time will inevitably leave some by the wayside. And so personally, for me, I voted for Lisa Nandy for a number of reasons. I think she's more decisive. I think she's more will take better action. But also, over the anti-Semitism crisis in the Labour Party, there is a lot of sayers. There were a lot of people who said a lot of things. There weren't as many doers who actually took action. And Lisa Nandy literally took action to change something. And when she was offered a job on one occasion, she was offered a job back in after the whole satisfied with the answer, and so she said, I won't serve you. You know, these are actual physical actions of a person trying to change things. And so for that and other reasons. Also, we always have a dude. I'd like it to be a woman. So that's why I'm going Lisa Nandy.
I'm not a deputy. I'm the chairman of the Representative Council here in Birmingham. I'm also the vice chairman of this synagogue. I'm also the founder member of Nisa Nashim, which you referred to, the Muslim-Jewish Women's Dialogue Group in Birmingham, something I felt very strongly about. And I'm also the chairperson, you see it's endless what my capabilities are. I'm also the chairperson of West Midlands Friends of Israel. And I wanted to say, thank you, Jess. I didn't want to ask you a question. What I've heard makes me feel exactly the same as I felt about Preet and also about my dear friend Ian Austin. I've never voted Labour in my life. I can't imagine I ever will. But I did tell Preet and Ian I thought Ian would make a fantastic leader of the Labour Party, and then I certainly would have voted for it. And I have to say that if I was in your constituency, I would feel very moved towards voting for you, even though it's totally against the grain for me. But what I feel is very strongly is that with women like you and Preet as MPs for Birmingham, we have a lot to be grateful for, and I feel that that needs to be said. You, as a politician, on behalf of the whole of the Birmingham Jewish community, is to thank you for your known support, for your stand against anti-Semitism, for your standing up for Israel when it counts. I want you to understand that most people in this room, and I don't know hardly any of them, but I believe that most people in this room feel that standing up for Israel is important, but without a just peace or something, if whatever we're going to call it, with the Palestinians, we're never going to achieve anything. So West Midlands Friends of Israel stands up for Israel, but it also recognises that the Palestinians comes into this equation and that they need to be treated in a way which is socially, morally, religiously just. And I feel that I want you to know that, so that when you're trying to defend why you're being picked on for Israel, and you're not Jewish, you've never hardly been to Israel, that people like me and the followers, the 250 subscribers to West Midlands Friends of Israel, do appreciate your efforts. So thank you.
Do any more deputy? Thank you. Thank you. Two more.
Jeremy Michelson, Manchester Great New and Central Synagogue. Jess, how do you foresee what might happen as a result of the EHRC ruling when it comes? How do you foresee the Labour Party reacting to it?
Thank you. And everyone, of course, is taking steps to stand well away from the microphone. So thank you for everybody doing that. Normally,
when you're at like an event with a religious community, if you try and keep away from them, that would be considered to be like quite bad. Normally, it would be definitely considered that I was being rude. I think that the EHRC will come after we have a new leader. I mean, it certainly will now that we're in this time of crisis. And in some ways, I think that's almost a shame, actually, because I feel like the people who are currently in charge need, well, actually, I shouldn't prejudge what it's going to say, but I helped give in some of the evidence, so I have a fair idea of what it will say. I think that they need to answer to that, actually, because racism of any form is one thing that can be explained away with somebody's a bit old, it's not like that, it didn't used to be like that. Institutional, built-in racism has to be built, and that is quite a different thing. And so if the charge of being institutionally anti-Semitic, which I cannot see how they will escape that charge, because it isn't just idiots posting tweets. We're talking about motions to CLP meetings that are allowed, that say horrendous things, that dispel any complaint about anti-Semitism as nothing. There has been a huge amount within the actual institution and organisation of the Labour Party that has been so utterly questionable that if it were about any other faith or form of racism, would never be allowed to be put forward as a motion for debate in a Labour Party meeting. So I think that it'll be Keir Starmer who's going to win the Labour Party leadership, and I imagine that he will take it incredibly seriously and try and do absolutely every single thing that it recommends. Any leader of the Labour Party now who takes over will try and do every single one of the recommendations, and inevitably what will happen is that some within the Labour movement will claim that it's a nonsense, it's a smear, and that they shouldn't have to do it, and they'll try and explain away as if there is an explanation for something like that. And frankly, in the event of that happening, I think that those people have absolutely no place in the Labour movement. If you think that we don't have to do something about it, find yourself another political party and go and join that one, would be what I would suggest. But that's not very unifying, is it?
Thank you. Okay, please. Thank you.
Richard Sassoon, S&P Sephardi Community. A genuine question here. How does... Sorry. A question here. How does the Labour Party's treatment of anti-Semitism compare to the treatment with regard to the feminism versus trans debate?
Do you want to?
No, because that's causing genuine friction, and I'm just wondering if it's the old adage of what starts with the Jews doesn't end with the Jews, and that actually there's something that's spreading that's stopping debate and calling people bad names and trying to get people no platformed and things like that. There seems to me, at least, to be a lot of similarities when perhaps there are genuine, when there may be genuine issues.
Right, Jess has got questions, so Jess can give shorter answers because of time. Thank you.
I thought I might, for one day, escape talking about the women versus trans issue, but no, here we are. So, yeah, I think it's exactly the same. I think that there is a huge problem with an us and them attitude, that it does seem that, what starts with the Jews, doesn't end with the Jews. It spreads itself out. There does seem to be and what I would say, the main similarity that I can find between the way that anti-Semitism has been handled in the Labour Party is the way that sexual, but very much more recently seems very much like if you're a bit gropey and you're a mate of the leadership, that's okay. That it's not confined only to the way that they've dealt with anti-Semitism. The reason why anti-Semitism made such a huge, it was, out in the media so much more, is that there did just seem to be an enormous sea change in the language, and that is the same as we are seeing the vitriol and the language in the debate that you're talking about. We're seeing that exactly the same. Good or a baddie, and if you don't think 100% one way on everything, that you are literally, you know, you belong in the sea. And it's just not, the world just doesn't work like that. The world is not like that. It just isn't, and the Labour Party has got to stop pretending that it is, because the left always has to do better on these things. I wish that we only had to live by the standards of the right, who can call people, you know, things with watermelon smiles and call Muslim women letterboxes. I wish that we could only, you know, but the left has to be better by virtue of the thing that it professes to be.
Sarah Cowan, Union of Jewish Students. Hello. Firstly, I just wanted to echo what Ruth said about how much I admire your work and also your continued support of the Jewish community and young people and women and young women. And I just wanted to ask you, kind of on the theme of young people, I have lots and lots of friends who are ideologically Labour and feel very strongly about Labour's values, and had to, sadly, as Boris Johnson said, lend their vote. And I just wondered what you think that the new Labour Party can do, the new Labour leadership can do, what you can do to bring back young people, kind of ignite that spark in them again, make them feel like they're not alienated, that they're not abused on Twitter for their religion and their ideological beliefs. Yeah, and again, thank you so much for everything that you do.
No worries. I think that young people, especially young Jewish women, actually have suffered the worst of what has happened within the Labour movement, because so much of the vitriol is online, and the online spaces and campus spaces where it has become it's really, really incredibly hostile. And I feel absolutely no surprise that people felt that they would lend their vote elsewhere for all sorts of reasons, and for being from all sorts of different categories of people, young, old, up north, down south. It went on everywhere, I'm afraid to say, as we can see from the result. What we can do, I mean, within the Labour Party, first of all, you can have you can have an actual zero tolerance policy with how people get talked to. That would help a huge amount. But the Labour Party has to do so much more to win back people's votes that were lent to the Conservatives for the very first time, regardless of their ideology, with regard to socialism or, you know, communitarian social democracy. Most people actually don't sit around all day thinking about which ideological framework they sit within. They're worrying about the bins. Especially my comments about bins, for the people who aren't from Birmingham in the room, you may not understand quite how awful the bin service is in Birmingham, and it is literally the most pressing issue for almost every single person in the city. It's a big deal, and it's largely because of Unite the Union. Anyway, less said about that, the better. The truth is that we have got to talk about the future and offer hope about the future, and not constantly hamper back to something that things that happened in the past, or rest on the laurels of the past, even the bit of the past that I really, really, really like and really changed my life, saved my life. But we have got to stop thinking that we deserve a right to exist without earning it through credibility. You'll win amazing amounts of votes back by being credible. I mean, Boris Johnson's he's not credible at all.
Last question from our host, David, and then Amanda will give a vote of thanks, and we will have a break for lunch.
Okay, I'm David Benson from Central Synagogue here, so we sort of live quite close to each other, really, don't we? I know all about the bins, yeah, but I live in a flat, so anyhow. Thank you very much for coming. Really welcome to Birmingham Central Synagogue, and thank you, Danny, for being with you as well. You're a great boy, great man. What I wanted to ask you, Jess, if you don't mind, firstly, can I say I think you're a brilliant MP and a brilliant person as well. Absolutely superb. But, you know, a lot of people is, as it was, and the word Labour Party is a label. Things don't last forever. And maybe it's time that those people go away and it's you who goes and joins another party where you've got all those colleagues who have left come and join and the sensible people in your party join as well.
I can see the argument for that in a not first past the post political system. If the Labour Party declines at the rate it declined in the last general election at the next one, there is almost no argument for the branding of the Labour Party meaning anything anymore. And we've seen that in Ireland, the Labour Party is, we've seen it in other countries, and then we've seen it rise again, like in New Zealand, for example. And to me, there's a couple of things. I don't want to let those people own the Labour Party. It is not the Labour movement that my grandparents helped to build. There's an element of like, go and play up your own end, this is mine, about it, but also it wouldn't have worked, as we saw. It didn't work. Exist in a political climate where binaries are everything. We live in a very binary time, and for that time, the sort of plurality of coalition politics that exists in other parts of Europe, it just seems like it would falter at the moment. And my dad always said to me, don't vote for what you want necessarily, vote for what you don't want. And so you have to, at the time, make the decision for what is best to keep out the worst. And I'm not suggesting I've managed to do that successfully, but that is what needs to be done. But I make no bones about it. If the Labour Party continues to decline, we cannot just think that there is only one solution. Wherever there is a crisis, you have to look for a new solution. And if it became very clear that that was the new solution, it is just a word. So,
thank you. Jess, I think you can tell from the warmth in the room for your words that you've been giving and continue to give on the issues of anti-Semitism and all the issues that we as Jews care about in terms of religious freedoms and living here in the United Kingdom. I know you're familiar with the 10 pledges that we shared with all the leadership candidates, and they are, as far as we're concerned, the start point for rebuilding the trust between the Jewish community and the Labour Party. I think we all feel reassured and grateful from the words that we've heard today that, while we're holding the new leader to account for the actions that they're going to take in unifying, in showing leadership, but also in tackling these issues, that you'll also be holding the leader and the deputy leader to account. And we thank you enormously for that today. Thank you, and Danny, for being with us. And everybody, a vote of thanks for Jess. Thank you.